It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. They did not call it evil. They did not call it a god. They called it the sleeper because, well, anything else might wake it. Before history, before the world settled into the shape we know, something came hidden inside a storm of fire. The sky burned, the sun screamed, and when the light faded, it remained. Those who understood it built prisons, not of iron, but of design, waiting. Then they erased themselves, leaving only warnings no one remembers. Humanity forgot. But the sun still breathes, the cycles still turn, and far below stone and ice, something stirs at the memory of fire. The pyramids are older than we think, by Lorenzo van Matterhorn. Part 1. Well, the instant coffee had been dead for hours, a thin skin of oil floating on top, but Dr. Ethan Caldwell never touched it. He was locked onto the ground-penetrating radar monitor, watching something that should not exist claw its way into view in sickly green lines. Outside the tent, the Giza Plateau roasted under an August sun that was showing no mercy. Inside, the AC rattled and the darkness felt like cover, like a bunker. Run it again. Alexei Morozov didn't question him. 3 years in this dirt together, a dozen sites across 3 continents, had taught the Russian geologist when to shut up and when to listen. His thick hands moved fast over the keys, launching another sweep. The pulse punched deeper into the limestone, and the data that came back spat in the face of every survey ever done here. The image slowly sharpened frame by frame. 200 feet below the known chambers of the Great Pyramid, there was nothing. No solid rock. It wasn't rubble. Just a void, huge, hollow, and waiting. It stretched at least 100 meters across, and the edges were clean, sharp, and extremely straight. Nature didn't make shapes like that. There's no record of this, Morozov said, his voice low. Nothing in the texts, nothing in the scans. I know this stone. Look at the density numbers, Ethan. Caldwell leaned in. The rock around the cavity was completely wrong. It was fractured, restructured. Crystals warped as if they'd been shocked. This wasn't down to slow pressure and time. This was heat, extreme heat, fast enough to scar limestone, fast enough to half melt it. It's like someone burned this space out, Morozov said, like a cutting torch scaled up to a skyscraper. But the pyramid's 4,500 years old. This chamber is older than... Hey, don't. Caldwell raised a hand without looking away. Not yet, look, don't say it. We didn't need to. The numbers were already screaming at them. Caldwell's thoughts drifted to Professor Raymond Halstead. 10 years dead now, his reputation shredded. The old man had gone down for fighting for a theory no one wanted to hear. Something before Egypt, before Sumer, before the neat timelines everyone agreed to pretend were settled. The journals had torn him apart. Conferences had laughed him out of rooms. Caldwell pulled out his phone and found the photo he'd taken at Halstead's funeral. The professor lay still, finally untouchable, his face calm for the first time in years. Damn it, I'll finish it, Caldwell muttered to himself. I'll prove you weren't crazy. A hand slid into his peripheral vision, offering a fresh cup of coffee. Layla al-Masri. She had a habit of appearing exactly when things were about to tip. 32, razor-sharp, and battle-hardened by years of navigating Egyptian permits and political landmines that chewed up lesser people. You need food, she said. You've been buried in here 14 hours. Well, we found something. I know, Layla said. Everyone knows. Morozov doesn't whisper. She studied the screen, her face tightening. That's real. Under the pyramid, it's really there. Her fingers drifted to the silver cross at her neck, like she hadn't decided to do it. My grandmother used to tell stories, she said quietly, Old ones, from before Islam even, before Christianity. She said the pyramids weren't built by kings. She said they were already standing when the first people reached the Nile, and that our civilization was built on top of something we never understood. Caldwell looked at her. What else? Layla hesitated. She said they were warnings, and that digging too deep was how you invite what they were meant to keep buried. Well, another 3 months followed. 3 months of smiling officials with dead eyes, of bribes wrapped in paperwork, of permits approved, stamped, lost, and resurrected just long enough to be killed again. Caldwell spent the time tearing through every scan and every survey ever run at Giza, hunting for a mistake or maybe a clue. And there was nothing. Either everyone had missed it, or someone had seen it and buried the truth harder than the stone itself. The second option was the one that kept him awake at night. During the waiting, Professor William Harding flew in from Cambridge. Well, they'd been inseparable in grad school. Young, arrogant, convinced they'd be the ones to rewrite history. And Harding had played it safe. Careful papers, solid conclusions. A career no one would ever try to destroy. He looked at the data and said nothing for a long time. When he finally did, his voice had lost its academic polish. "If this is real," he said, "then a lot of very powerful people are going to want it to stay buried." Caldwell had walked straight after Halstead, off the paved road of safe ideas and into badlands where reputations went to die. "Tell me you're not hunting ghosts," Harding said over dinner. They were seated at a restaurant perched above the Nile, the river below black and slow, reflecting Cairo's lights like broken constellations. "Look at the data," Caldwell said, and he shoved a folder across the table. Harding hesitated and then opened it. Radar scans, density charts, thermal overlays. Page by page, his skepticism started to crack. His eyes widened, but his jaw stiffened. No, this can't be right." "It is," Caldwell said. "We ran it through 3 independent systems, different operators, different calibrations." Harding set the folder down like it might actually bite him. "If there's really a chamber that big under the pyramid, then—" But he didn't finish that sentence. He didn't have to. "And this blows the timeline apart," Caldwell said. "Everything we think we know about Egypt." Harding picked up his fork, then put it down untouched. "You know they'll come for you. They'll say that your readings are contaminated, that your equipment glitched, that you're seeing patterns because you want to." Well, they said the same about Halstead. Harding's face softened slightly. "Look, Raymond was my friend too. When his ideas wrecked him, I don't want to watch you burn the same way." "Well, then don't," Caldwell said. "Help me lock it down. Help me make it undeniable." Permits came through on a Wednesday in late September, stamped and signed like a death warrant. Caldwell gathered the team at first light. Morozov on geology, Layla handling coordination and damage control, Dr. Caleb Rourke overseeing structural integrity, and a pack of grad students buzzing with ambition and caffeine. They started drilling that afternoon. It was painfully slow. No explosives, no shortcuts. 200 feet of limestone had to be chewed through 1 careful meter at a time. Every section reinforced, every vibration monitored. The pyramid itself treated like a patient on life support. Well, of course, the Ministry of Antiquities sent observers. They watched everything, but silently, unblinking, like guards in a high-security block. "They're nervous," Layla said on day 5, wiping dust from her hands. "They're making calls, a lot of them. Someone above them is spooked." "Good," Caldwell said. "They should be." The drill punched through on a Sunday morning. Caldwell was bent over schematics in his tent when Morozov's voice burst through the radio, thick with adrenaline. "Ethan, we're in. We hit the cavity. You need to get here now." Well, Caldwell ran. By the time he reached the site, sweat soaked his shirt and his heart was slamming like it wanted out. A crowd ringed the drill shaft. Workers, students, officials. Everyone staring down into pure black. "We sent a camera," Morozov said, shoving a tablet into Caldwell's hands. "Watch." The feed showed stone sliding past as the camera descended. Tight walls, LED glare, and then nothing. Open space. The light reached out and found no walls, no ceiling. The void swallowed it whole. This chamber was massive, its scale almost impossible to grasp. And then the camera touched down, tipped slightly, pointing upward. Something reflected the light. It was smooth, dark, and precise, and it wasn't rock. Caldwell felt his lungs lock in place. "Right, we're going down." It took 4 days to install a steel shaft with ladder rungs bolted tight. The observers checked every weld like they were expecting someone to tamper with it. Caldwell used the delay to prep gear, floodlights, cameras, sampling kits, and a Geiger counter he couldn't justify but refused to leave behind. Thursday evening, and the pyramid burned orange under the setting sun. Caldwell clipped in and started down. Layla had argued to go first, but he shut that down. This was his find, his gamble. If something waited below, it would meet him before anyone else. The climb down took 20 minutes, hand over hand, rung by rung, dropping through stone that hadn't been disturbed since before history had bothered keeping track. His headlamp carved a small, moving bubble of light. Halfway down, the air shifted. It became much cooler, drier even. Cave air. It was mineral sharp, and under it something else. Something old and organic. Something he couldn't explain. The shaft opened without warning. 1 second he was boxed in by limestone, and the next he was hanging in open space, his light dying before it could find an edge. He climbed the last rungs and stepped off. His boots hit the floor and the sound came back at him from far away, much too far. He swept his lamp in a low arc. Pieces of the chamber emerged, and then vanished again into shadow. This place was enormous, easily 100 meters across. The ceiling was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Whatever this was, it had been here a very long time. The walls weren't jagged or raw like you might expect underground. They were slick, smoothed down to a near polish. Lines scored the surface in tight formation, grooves so exact they looked machined, not carved. Caldwell stepped closer and dragged a gloved hand across the stone. The cuts were shallow, dead straight, each one perfectly parallel, each exactly 3 millimeters deep. No variation, no slip. We'd seen marks like that in high-end fabrication labs, where computer-guided lasers sliced steel with surgical accuracy. But this place had been sealed for thousands of years. Then his radio hissed. "Ethan, what do you see?" Morozov's voice crackled through. It was thin and distant. "Well, something that should not exist," Caldwell said. He moved along the wall, his camera up, documenting every inch. And as he walked, the patterns shifted. The grooves stopped being simple lines and started twisting into deliberate designs, repeating sequences, structured forms. This was not decoration. It was more like, information. Maybe language. Maybe something older that served the same function. Then his light snagged on an opening at the far end of the chamber. There was a passage. It slanted down at a deep angle, deep and steep, dropping into deeper black. The entrance was trapezoidal, wider at the bottom, narrowing toward the top. The proportions felt off. They were unsettling, like they'd been designed for eyes that didn't favor right angles. Cold air spilled up from below, and it carried that mineral scent again, but it was much stronger now. Underneath it, there was something organic, something ancient, something that seemed to be decaying in slow motion. Well, he should have called it in, brought the team down, logged it properly. But instead, he stepped forward. The need to know superseded everything else. Part 2. The corridor ran long and narrow. He walked for about 10 minutes, always descending. The walls pressed close enough that he could brush both sides with his hands. The grooves continued here too, but they'd somehow evolved. Spirals now, fractal webs, geometric knots that seemed to crawl at the edges of his vision when he wasn't looking straight at them. The tunnel ended eventually at a door. Not a gap, not a break in the stone, an actual door. It was sealed tight with a thick layer of black material. Bitumen, maybe resin, smeared heavy around the edges. The surface was carved from end to end with symbols. Caldwell stopped in front of it. His pulse was hammering. After all, no one had laid eyes on this in thousands of years. The symbols were alien, but familiar in fragments. They carried hints of hieroglyphics, flickers of proto-cuneiform structure, but they didn't really belong to any known system. Each marking was layered, components nested inside other components, like the meaning wasn't singular but somehow compounded. He photographed everything, hundreds of shots, wide angles, close-ups, texture scans. The seal was flawless. No cracks, no intrusion. Whoever had closed this had meant it to stay closed. He reached for his radio and then he froze. The Geiger counter on his belt was ticking. Well, it wasn't screaming, not spiking into panic, but it was steady. He unclipped it and held it closer to the door. The clicks accelerated. What the hell? There was no uranium in this region. The limestone here was clean, geologically dull, non-radioactive. Whatever was behind that barrier was emitting low-level radiation, though, and it had been doing it long enough that contamination should have bled into the surrounding rock. But the readings only jumped when he brought the device near the door itself. This was contained, shielded maybe. The seal wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. He stepped back slowly, his thoughts colliding. Well, this wasn't just archaeology anymore. This meant specialists, radiation teams, maybe even the military. This was beyond academia. So he turned to leave, and he saw it. Carved into the wall near the passage entrance, almost swallowed by shadow, was a simple emblem. 3 triangles pressed point to point, forming a larger triangle with a circle at its center. His stomach dropped. He'd seen this before. Months ago, a photograph sent by a colleague working on a site in Bosnia. It was the same mark, same proportions. Well, this realization hit him. If it was here and there, if this wasn't isolated, then... He climbed back up in a daze, barely aware of his hands on the rungs, barely answering Morozov's questions crackling from above. By the time he broke through into the night air, the desert cooled and the Milky Way smeared bright across the sky. His decision was already locked in. "We open it," he said. Well, it took 2 days to prepare. They couldn't just smash the seal. It had to be preserved, studied. Rourke engineered a steel framework to brace the structure, to keep the door from collapsing inward once the barrier was breached. The Egyptian observers hovered close, writing everything down, stepping away occasionally to make quiet phone calls out of earshot. "They're reporting up the chain," Layla murmured. "Someone powerful is watching this." "Let them watch," Caldwell said. "This is too big to bury." They eventually cracked the seal just after noon on Saturday. The black coating split with a dull snap and peeled away in heavy chunks. Air rushed out like a held breath finally released. It smelled of dust and crushed time, and something deeper, something much older. Something Caldwell couldn't name, but his nervous system recognized instantly. His body screamed danger, but his brain ignored it. The door gave way under its own weight. Stone rasped against stone as it swung inward. Beyond it was a second chamber, smaller than the first, tight, maybe 20 feet across. Caldwell stepped in first, his headlamp flaring. Morozov and Rourke followed closely behind, their boots scraping softly on the floor. 3 objects waited at the center of this room. They were arranged with surgical precision, forming a perfect triangle. Each one was pyramidal, about the size of a shoebox. Black stone, not glossy, just dead. The surfaces didn't reflect light so much as swallow it. Symbols crawled across every face, the same markings that had sealed the door, cut so clean they looked poured rather than carved. Caldwell moved closer. The Geiger counter on his belt began to chatter. Each step made it even louder. By the time he stood over the objects, the readings had tripled. Still technically safe, but still so deeply wrong. "What are they?" Rourke whispered. "I don't know," Caldwell replied. Morozov crouched beside one, careful to keep his hands off of it. "The stone, it's like obsidian, but heavier, much heavier." He hesitated and then continued. "And it's warm." Caldwell held his palm just above the surface. Heat radiated upward. Not sunlight heat, not electrical warmth. This was internal, as if the object itself was alive in some slow, controlled way. "Right. We need dates," Caldwell said. "Anything organic, fibers, residue, whatever we can carbon test." They sent samples to 3 separate labs. No shortcuts, no single point of failure. And while they waited, Caldwell buried himself in the symbols. He photographed every angle, every cut, and cross-referenced them with every ancient language database he could access. The same symbol kept surfacing on the pyramids, 3 triangles locked together, a circle pinned at the center, always prominent and always seemingly deliberate. A mark of authorship, or perhaps a warning. The results eventually arrived Wednesday morning via an encrypted email. Caldwell was alone in his tent, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise smear pink and gold across the pyramid's face. He opened the file, already rehearsing the conclusions in his head. Older than the pyramid, older than Egypt. A shock, but manageable. He read the report once and then again. By the 3rd time his hands were shaking. The organic material, plant fibers sealed inside the chamber, dated to 37,000 years before present, plus or minus 500. What? 37,000 years? Before agriculture, before pottery, before cities, before the timelines said modern humans had even spread beyond Africa. Before history, before culture, according to everything humanity told itself. Someone had built this place when humans were supposed to be crouched in caves, scraping survival from stone tools and luck. The coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, but he didn't even notice. His thoughts were detonating too fast for him to track. Bosnia, the symbol there, the symbol here. Same geometry, same execution. He grabbed his laptop and dug into his archives. Over decades, he collected thousands of site photos, out of curiosity, habit, obsession even. Now he combed through them with a single target in mind. This symbol appeared 14 times. 14 sites across 6 continents. Bosnia, Turkey at Göbekli Tepe, Japan, Yonaguni, Peru, Mexico, Indonesia, and Antarctica, in newly released satellite imagery where melting ice had exposed carved stone faces. Every one of these sites was controversial. Every one written off as natural formation, misinterpretation, fantasy. And every single one bore the same mark. 3 triangles with a circle at the center. Caldwell printed a world map and pinned each location in red. When he stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. The pattern was unmistakable. It wasn't random, not coincidence. A geometric network spanning the globe, planned, coordinated, and executed with intent. He called Harding immediately, ignoring the hour. "This better matter," Harding said, thick with sleep. "We dated the chamber," Caldwell said. 37,000 years. He was met with silence. That's impossible. I've got results from 3 labs, independent and clean. If that's true, Harding said slowly, that doesn't explain the same symbol appearing worldwide. 14 sites, William, including Göbekli Tepe, which is already 11,000 years old. Look, this isn't one anomaly. He paused, letting all of this land. This is evidence of a global civilization that existed before everything we thought we knew about being human. Silence stretched out between them. Caldwell could hear Harding breathe on the line. He pictured him sitting upright in bed, sheets tangled around his waist, the careful scaffolding of his academic worldview buckling under the weight of what he'd just heard. Look, send me everything, Harding said at last. All of it. Images, measurements, dating reports. If this is real, if you're right, we don't say a word publicly until it's airtight. Oh, there's more, Caldwell said. The objects we found, they're, radioactive. Low level but constant. And they're warm, William. They've been sealed for 37,000 years and they're still generating heat. That's not possible. Yeah, I know, but it's happening. The next week disappeared into a blur of messages, calls, and half-slept nights. Caldwell reached out to researchers tied to every site marked by the symbol. Well, he asked careful questions, requested unpublished scans, field notes, anything that hadn't made it into journals. Well, most helped. Some hesitated. One didn't. A researcher in Peru called him on a bad line that crackled like it was being listened to. You need to stop asking questions, the man said. There are people who don't want this out. Important people. I was ordered to shut down my work. Funding threatened. Careers ended. Be careful, Dr. Caldwell. Well, this warning only hardened his resolve. If the symbols were the key, then he needed someone who could break them open. Not a conventional epigrapher. Someone sharp enough to face a language older than every known system and not even blink. Dr. Natalia Mandlikova arrived from Prague on a rain-soaked Tuesday, carrying a battered leather briefcase and zero patience for theatrics. 56 years old, silver hair pulled tight, and eyes that dissected everything they landed on. Show me why I crossed half the planet, she said flatly. Caldwell spread the photographs across his desk. The black pyramids, close-ups of the carvings, side-by-side comparisons of the same symbols turning up continents apart. Well, Mandlikova went silent. For 20 minutes she studied the images, occasionally lifting one closer to her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but something underneath had shifted. This is not Egyptian, not Sumerian, not Fertile Crescent. She tapped a cluster of markings. Look here. These sub-elements modify the primary symbol. They add tense, context, emphasis. This is not primitive. This is mature, fully evolved, which means the language itself existed for centuries, maybe millennia, before these objects were even carved. Can you read it? Caldwell asked. She looked up at him. That depends. How much time do I have? As much time as you need. She took over an empty tent and turned it into something between a war room and a university archive. Books, printouts, symbol charts everywhere. She worked 18-hour days, sleeping in fragments, fueled by coffee and her obsession. Caldwell watched the calendar bleed forward. Every passing day increased the risk. Rumors were already circulating that the ministry was reconsidering the permits. Pressure was coming from somewhere, from someone. On her 6th day, Mandlikova stepped out of her tent, looking wrecked, well, and electric. I have something. They gathered in the command tent. Caldwell, Morozov, Layla, Rourke, and Harding, who'd flown in overnight from England. Mandlikova laid her notes across the table, Pages dense with translations, syntax trees, mathematical references. The language uses base 12, she said. That alone tells us we're dealing with a culture far more mathematically advanced than anything that should exist in this era. What does it say? Caldwell asked. She picked up a photo of one of the Black Pyramids. This surface contains a designation, a title. The closest translation is the Sentinels. Not observers, guardians. The verb form implies obligation, duty, possibly sacrifice. She swapped the image for another. This section describes purpose. These were built as warnings, and the word I'm translating as monuments also carries the meaning of binding or a spell. The structure isn't just physical, it's functional. Warnings about what? Harding asked. Mandlikova pulled out a final page, her handwriting tight and jagged. About something sealed away, something dangerous. Well, the text isn't specific, but the emphasis is unmistakable. She met their eyes then, one by one. This is what it says. What sleeps beneath must never wake. The seals must hold. When the sky falls, the prison breaks. The whole tent went dead quiet. Outside, the wind had picked up, and sand was rattling against the canvas like dry rain. But Mandlikova didn't even notice. There's more, she said. The text hides coordinates, latitude and longitude, encoded in their base 12 system. I've translated 14 sets so far. Caldwell looked up then. Oh, the other sites, the ones with the same symbol. Yes, all of them. She nodded once, which means this wasn't local. This was coordinated, on a global level. Morozov leaned forward. Coordinated to do what? Oh, build monuments, Rourke said. Or to lock something away, Caldwell cut in. Well, he let those words hang. Look, the Sentinels didn't build these places to be admired. They built a prison. They built something, and they marked the location so no one would forget where not to dig. Buried what? Rourke asked. What could possibly need containment on a planetary scale? No one even tried to answer that one. That night Caldwell sat alone in his tent with a world map spread across a folding table and a bottle of whiskey meant for either triumph or disaster. He plotted the translated coordinates one by one. Red pins bloomed across the paper. The pattern was unmistakable. Geometric, intentional. Distances and angles locked into ratios that screamed planning and not chance. One pin sat at the bottom of the world. Antarctica. He stared at it for a long time, then opened his laptop and logged into a database of declassified satellite imagery. The search dragged on for hours, filtering through radar scans of the Antarctic ice sheet. Then he found it. Structures beneath the ice. Massive, colossal, pyramidal. Buried under 2 miles of frozen hell. The materials were so dense they punched clean signatures through the radar despite the depth. Far larger than anything at Giza. Caldwell grabbed his phone and scrolled until he found Dr. Ingrid Bergstrom. They'd met at a conference several years earlier, bonded over too much alcohol and shared hatred of academic politics. She was a glaciologist stationed at a Norwegian research base in Queen Maudland. Well, he called her on the off chance. She picked up on the 4th ring. Do you know what time it is? I need to talk to you about structures under the ice near your station. A long pause. How do you know about those? So, they're real. Another pause, longer this time. We've been pulling up worked stone for 3 years, she said quietly. Official line says glacial artifacts, but I've seen enough archaeology to know tool marks when I see them. The dating puts them at 40,000 years old, from before the ice. Caldwell's pulse spiked at this. What else haven't you told anyone? I sent samples to a lab in Stockholm, she said. The stone contains elements that shouldn't occur naturally on Earth. Well, trace amounts, but consistent. Someone suggested meteorites, but the distribution's too uniform. It's like whoever built them had access to materials that we don't. Hey, can you send me everything? Caldwell asked. I was ordered to stop, she replied. Funding threatened. Look, whatever you're into, please, be careful. Send it anyway. The encrypted files arrived less than an hour later. Caldwell opened them with shaking hands. The images showed black stone breaking through the ice, carved with symbols he now knew by heart. 3 triangles, a circle at the center, the language of the Sentinels. But these weren't chambers. They were mountains. The Giza void could fit inside a modern building. The Antarctic structures dwarfed landscapes. Whatever had been locked away there demanded containment on a geological scale, something meant to last through ice ages and extinctions. Caldwell suddenly felt very small and very afraid. Part 3. In the days that followed, he and Mandlikova pushed deeper into the translations. The story came together in pieces, fragments torn from a shattered whole, but the shape of it became clear. The Sentinels had been a global civilization during the last ice age, advanced, connected. They built cities in places now drowned or frozen, trade networks that spanned continents, knowledge that modern science was only starting to circle back toward. And then something had happened. The text called it the falling of fire from the sky. A sudden catastrophe, an arrival, something they couldn't kill, only contain. Mandlikova leaned back late one night. Her eyes were bloodshot and her voice was thin with exhaustion. Listen to this part. Mandlikova tapped a page, her finger steady despite the words. This is from the primary inscription on the largest structure, she said, the core text. She then read aloud. We who watch have failed to destroy the sleeper. That sentence sat heavy in the air. Its nature is beyond our understanding. Its substance is neither living nor dead, neither matter nor energy. It exists between states. Caldwell felt a chill creep up his spine. And it hungers. Hungers for what? Caldwell asked. The text never says outright, Mandlikova replied, but there are repeated references to consumption, to energy transfer, to growth through absorption. Whatever this thing is, it feeds, and when it feeds, it spreads. Caldwell thought of the Geiger counter ticking faster near the Black Pyramids, the warmth bleeding from the stone that shouldn't generate heat. Oh, they're not just warning signs, he said. They're active components, part of the cage. Mandlikova nodded. Yeah, that's my reading as well. These aren't monuments, they're locks. The architecture itself is functional. The Sentinels didn't just build walls, they engineered systems, possibly electromagnetic, possibly something closer to quantum containment. Yeah, and they built them everywhere, Caldwell said, because either this thing is too powerful for a single prison, or it isn't confined to one place. The text supports that, Mandlikova said. It speaks of deep places where it sleeps, plural. That could mean fragments of a single entity, or multiple entities of the same kind. The language is deliberately vague. Caldwell stood and stepped toward the tent opening. Outside, the pyramid loomed in silhouette against a sky thick with stars. They were trying to protect us, he said. People who wouldn't exist for tens of thousands of years. They burned their entire civilization to keep this contained. There's, one more section, Mandlikova said quietly. You need to hear it. She turned a page. It's a prediction or a warning. She took a deep breath before continuing. The Sentinels tracked celestial cycles in extreme detail. They charted the sky over generations. They believed a specific event would repeat. Something they called the falling fire or the storm of light. A solar storm, Caldwell said. That's the closest modern term, she agreed. But they describe it as more than radiation. They believed it carried something, that it acted as a conduit from somewhere else. She looked up, and they calculated when it would happen again. Well, Caldwell felt his stomach drop. When? According to their math, she said. Soon, within years, possibly months. Cold flooded his veins. Well, look, we need confirmation, he said. An astrophysicist. Dr. Leonard Wu at Caltech was one of the few people who hadn't cut Caldwell loose when his work drifted into forbidden territory. Yeah, they'd been roommates once, back when the future still looked predictable. Wu had chosen physics, order, equations that behaved. Caldwell sent him the astronomical data without explanation. Wu replied within hours. What the hell is this? Where did you get these calculations? They quickly switched to video, and Wu's face appeared on the screen, grainy and tired. These are long-term solar observations, Wu said. I mean, extremely long-term. Whoever recorded this tracked the sun for centuries, maybe longer, and with terrifying precision. Can you verify the prediction? Caldwell asked. At this, Wu's expression hardened. That's why I'm calling. The math describes a very specific solar event, a coronal mass ejection paired with abnormal magnetic field behavior. We've only seen anything remotely similar once, in 1859. The Carrington event, Caldwell said. Yes, Wu replied. But this? He shook his head. Well, the energy levels here are orders of magnitude higher, and the cycle they're describing is roughly 40,000 years. He glanced off screen, checking something. Ethan, I've been monitoring unusual solar activity for 6 months. There's a developing pattern. Early-stage indicators. They match what's in your data. How long do we have? Wu hesitated before answering. Impossible to say. Could be years, could be weeks. But if an event like this hits Earth, we're talking about a planet-wide electromagnetic pulse. Power grid's gone, satellites dead, computers fried. Civilization collapses overnight. Well, that's not what scares me, Caldwell said. Then he told him everything. The chamber, the black pyramids, the translations, the global network, the warning. Wu didn't interrupt, and by the end, his face looked drawn, almost sick. You're saying there's something imprisoned beneath these sites? Wu said slowly, and a massive solar storm could destabilize the containment. Yeah, that's exactly what they warned about, Caldwell said. When the sky falls, the prison breaks. Wu exhaled hard. This is insane. You're describing something out of a nightmare. Yeah, I know how it sounds, Caldwell said. But the structures are real. The radiation is real, and now you're telling me the astronomy is real too. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything they'd said. Wu went quiet. Not the thoughtful kind. Dead air, like a line that might have gone cold. Then, finally, what do you want me to do? Watch the sun, Caldwell said. Track every twitch, every spike, and hope the Sentinels didn't cheap out when they built the cage. That night he didn't sleep. Caldwell lay on his cot while the desert breathed around him, wind scraping sand across canvas, across bone. He kept seeing stone warnings and dead civilizations that had screamed into rock because screaming into the future was all they had left. At 2 a.m., he stopped pretending rest was possible, so he grabbed his gear and walked out to the dig. The chamber was sealed, locked down tight for the night. He unlocked it anyway. All rules felt small now. He went down alone, the headlamp cutting weak cones of light through the passage. Shadows slid and warped along the walls, like they were trying to keep up with him. Well, the deeper he went, the heavier it felt. It wasn't just psychologically, physically, as if the stone overhead was gaining in mass, like gravity itself had sharpened its teeth. The inner chamber opened up, and there they were, the 3 black pyramids, waiting for him. Yes, they were warm. Not imagined, not nerves. Heat was bleeding off them in a steady, undeniable way. He hovered his hand near the surface and flinched. The stone radiated like a body with a fever. "What the hell are you?" he muttered. The radiation counter at his belt ticked faster than before. Still not lethal, still not enough to panic the safety officers, but it was higher, cleanly, measurably higher. Something had shifted, something was stirring. Caldwell sat on the cold floor and stared. All those translations ran through his head, alignments, celestial geometry, windows when the seals thinned. He thought about Wu's voice, worried, talking about storms stacking on storms out on the surface of the sun. Was this a reaction? Were the pyramids listening to the sky? The Sentinels had known physics that modern science only brushed against. Entanglement, non-locality, connections that laughed at distance. What if the pyramids weren't isolated at all? What if every site on the planet was wired together, parts of one enormous system, a machine built to hold something that didn't obey the rules of being held? Then his headlamp flickered. He slapped it once, and the light dipped anyway. Then his radio started hissing. Static surged and dropped in a slow, steady rhythm. In, out, in, out. Like breathing. The symbols carved into the nearest pyramid lit up. Caldwell scrambled backward, his palms skidding on the stone. The glow was dim at first, a deep internal red, like embers buried under ash. It pulsed, slowly, intentionally, not light on the stone, but inside it. Alive. Then came the sound. It wasn't loud, which made it worse. It was a subaudible hum that hit his chest before it reached his ears. It vibrated through the chamber, through the rock, through his bones. The frequency was wrong in a way that bypassed thought and went straight for instinct. Fear bloomed in him, raw and animal. He tried to stand, but his legs refused. Then the hum deepened. The symbols flared brighter. Pressure built behind his eyes, in the soft spaces of his skull, like fingers pressing from the inside out. The chamber stretched and collapsed at the same time, walls fleeing into impossible distance while crowding close enough to crush him. Time felt like it had broken, seconds smeared into something elastic and meaningless. And then the visions hit. Not pictures exactly, not hallucinations either. Data. Antarctica, 40,000 years ago. Not ice, but green valleys, rivers cutting through stone, cities of white and crystal, catching sunlight and shattering it into color. Alive, thriving, and impossible. The people were human and, at the same time, not. Taller, elongated skulls, eyes that carried too much understanding. The Sentinels, not aliens and not gods, just humanity, split early, grown sideways instead of forward. A branch that climbed higher than the rest ever would. He saw their observatories, instruments aimed not just at stars but invisible currents, electromagnetic tides threading through space, binding everything together. They'd tracked this storm for centuries, but they hadn't known what it would carry. The sky ignited, green and violet fire poured across the atmosphere, auroras so intense they turned the world luminous. The Sentinels watched, calculated, and understood, just too late. Something rode the solar wind, something ancient, older than stars, older than planets. It had no name because language came after it, no shape because it lived between matter and energy. But it was aware. It was starving, and it had been patient beyond comprehension. The storm was feeding it, had awoken it. Let it notice the small blue world below. It fell, not like a meteor, but like intent, slipping into the crust, burrowing deep, hunting the planet's warm, living core. And the Sentinels, knowing they couldn't kill it, had done the only thing left. They'd locked it away and prayed the sky would never fall again. The Sentinels had known the instant it arrived. Reality buckled around it. Energy vanished into it like water down a drain. It did not discriminate, it It didn't choose, it just fed on everything. Left unchecked, it would keep growing until there was nothing left to grow into. They threw everything they had at it, every machine, every breakthrough, every weapon they'd ever built, and it didn't matter. You can't kill something that isn't alive. You can't destroy something that exists in multiple states at once, here and not here, present and absent, locked in quantum overlap. So they stopped trying to kill it, and they built a cage instead. Part 4. The vision dragged Caldwell down beneath the Antarctic ice, into a cavern so vast it mocked human scale. The Sentinels had carved it out with tools that sang through stone, lining the walls with materials tuned to exact frequencies designed to weaken, suppress, and starve. Physics bent there, shaped by knowledge that wouldn't resurface for 40,000 years. Even that wasn't enough. The thing was vast, deep, so spread out. So they multiplied the prisons. Black pyramids rose across the world. Deserts, ice, ocean floors, each one a node, each one reinforcing the others. Not monuments, but components, parts of a planetary restraint system holding something that could not be held in one place. Then the world turned against them. The climate shifted, the ice advanced, crops failed, and time ran out. They couldn't save themselves and finish the prison, so they chose the prison. Caldwell had now seen their final days. Cities empties, knowledge abandoned, survival reduced to cold and hunger. The great minds scattered and were then gone. But the pyramids stood, the fields held, and the thing beneath the world slept, trapped in stone, radiation, and carefully tuned force. The last Sentinels carved warnings into the black stone, messages cut by hands that already knew they were dead. Then they walked into the snow and never came back. The vision then let go of him without mercy, and Caldwell collapsed onto the chamber floor, his lungs burning. The glow was gone, the hum had died. His headlamp flickered back to life, shining on ordinary rock. Nothing looked wrong, but nothing felt real anymore. The images lingered behind his eyes, those warnings, the sacrifice. He couldn't remember leaving the chamber. The next thing he knew, dawn was breaking and he was sitting outside his tent, sand cold beneath him, Layla gripping his shoulder. "Dr. Caldwell, you're bleeding." He touched his face, and his fingers came back wet and red. A nosebleed he hadn't even felt. I'm fine," he said. "You're not," she said. "What happened?" He told her everything, the symbols, the sound, the vision, and she didn't interrupt once. And when he finished, she shook her head. "You need a doctor. That sounds like a seizure or a hallucination." It wasn't," Caldwell replied. "I saw things I could not know, and we can check them. Antarctica, there were cities. If we look, we'll find traces." "Even if that's true," she said softly, "you went through something extreme. Please let me call someone." He agreed, mostly for her sake, though. The doctor, a British expat attached to the research teams, ran every test he could. Stroke? No. Seizure? No. Neurological damage? None at all. Exhaustion and dehydration," the doctor said. "And maybe too much time underground. You get some rest, drink some water. Stop spending nights in sealed chambers." Caldwell nodded, but didn't sleep. The vision had shown him the part that mattered. The entity wasn't locked in one place. No, it was threaded through the Earth's crust, tendrils running through stone like roots through soil. The pyramids hadn't trapped it. They merely checked it, slowed it and starved it. And now the system was slipping. He called an emergency meeting. They crowded into the command tent. Morozov, Layla, Rourke, Mandlikova. Harding joined by video from England, his face jittering on the screen. "We need eyes on every site," Caldwell said. "No build-up, no hesitation. All of them." "Why?" Harding asked. "What's happening?" "The artifacts are heating up. Radiation's climbing. If it's happening elsewhere too, the entire network is reacting." "To what?" Harding asked. But Caldwell didn't answer. Morozov did, his voice low. To, failure. Caldwell didn't sleep at all for the next 3 days. He lived on caffeine and the constant sick feeling crawling up his spine as he worked his way through every contact he had. Archaeologists, geophysicists, survey teams, anyone stationed at a site marked with a Sentinels symbol. Calls, emails, encrypted messages. One by one the replies came in. And they were all bad. Bosnia. The pyramids are producing low-frequency emissions. You can't hear them, but you feel them in your bones. People are leaving their homes. Some are getting nosebleeds. Turkey. Göbekli Tepe is vibrating. The stones hum at night. We've shut the site down, and tourists were reporting nausea and panic attacks. Japan. The Yonaguni structures are throwing off electromagnetic pulses. Navigation systems are glitching. Commercial ships are rerouting. Peru. Sacsayhuaman is warm. Not sun-warm, no, internal, like heat coming from inside the rock. Every single site, no exceptions. Different symptoms, but the same message. The global network was no longer dormant. The nodes were reacting together, like organs in the same body responding to a shock. And then Antarctica checked in. Bergstrom's email hit harder than the rest. We're seeing seismic activity beneath the ice. It's not tectonic. The waveforms are wrong. This isn't the crust shifting. It's displacement. Something is moving, Ethan. Something enormous. Caldwell compiled everything into one brutal document. Radiation spikes, thermal rise, EM interference, subsonic acoustics, seismic anomalies. The data did not argue. It pointed only in one direction. The prison was coming apart. Look, we need to go public, he said during the next team meeting. Now, people need warning. Warning about what? Warning them of what? Rourke shot back. That something buried 40,000 years ago is waking up? We'll get laughed off the planet. Well, you already think I'm crazy, Caldwell said flatly. At least this way the evidence exists. Harding tried anyway. Took the full package, dating results, translations, synchronized activations, Wu's solar storm projections, and he requested an emergency session with the Royal Society. They refused, didn't even review it. The response when it came was surgical and cold. Harding was advised to reconsider his associations, warned about reputational damage, and gently reminded that extraordinary claims without precedent rarely end careers well. Well, they wouldn't listen, Harding said later, his voice stripped hollow. I showed them everything. They called it coincidence. Faulty instruments. One of them even laughed. What about intelligence agencies? Caldwell asked. I tried. Same wall. The idea that something alien and dangerous is buried under the planet, well, it's too far outside their reality. They can't process it, so they reject it. Well, not everyone did, though. 3 days after Harding's failure, Caldwell looked up from his desk to see a black SUV roll into the dig site, diplomatic plates gleaming in the sun. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, American, grey hair cut short, eyes sharpened by long exposure to classified truths. She did not give her name at first. Dr. Caldwell, she said, we should talk. Inside his tent, the heat warped the air. She laid a folder on his desk and opened it. Photos, reports, red stamps, black bars. We've been tracking anomalous activity in ancient sites for 7 years, she said. Radiation, EM interference, acoustic events. Well, we couldn't find a pattern. She then looked at him. Until you did. Wait, you believe this? Caldwell asked. I believe the data, she said. Whether the cause is an ancient civilization, non-human intelligence, or something we don't have language for yet, the escalation is real. She then slid one more document forward. A monitoring station in New Mexico has been detecting a low-frequency signal coming from the Earth itself. It started weak, intermittent. It was 3 months ago. She tapped the page then. But it's continuous now, growing stronger. Same frequency as the pyramid sites worldwide. Caldwell gulped. Something's waking up. That is our assessment, she said. We have satellites watching every site, listening posts, but if you're right, if containment is failing, what can we actually do? Well, Caldwell didn't answer immediately. The Sentinels, with all their impossible knowledge, hadn't been able to destroy it. Modern humanity, with its fragile grids and blunt tools, wouldn't stand a chance. Finally, he said, "We need to understand the system. The Black Pyramids aren't markers, they're machinery. If we can learn how they work, maybe we can reinforce them." She nodded once. "That's why I'm here. You are cleared to continue, full authorization. Whatever you need, funding, personnel, access, you will have it." She then closed the folder. "Because if this thing gets out," she said, "there won't be a second chance." "But Ethan, we don't have time. Whatever schedule you think you're on, burn it down. Move faster." The weeks that followed blurred into a relentless grind. Caldwell and the team tore the Black Pyramids apart without touching them, peeling back their secrets with scanners, particle imaging, and radiation sensors. They mapped heat surges, traced invisible currents, followed spikes that rose and fell with no respect for human sleep cycles. Mandlikova translated non-stop, chasing patterns through the symbols, hunting for schematics, commands, anything that looked like instructions instead of prayers. What they uncovered made the idea of stone monuments laughable. Yes, the pyramids weren't solid at all. They were machines, nightmare machines, packed with microscopic channels and chambers so fine they only revealed themselves under electron microscopes. The material wasn't just unknown, it was plain wrong. Elements fused into crystalline lattices that should have collapsed under their own instability, yet sat there quietly rewriting the rules of chemistry. "Look at this," Mozarov said, dragging a heat map across his screen. "The radiation isn't leaking. It's routed, directed. It moves through the structure like circuitry." "Like transmission lines?" Rourke asked. "Exactly," Morozov replied. "This is not decay, it's output. These things are broadcasting." "To who?" Rourke asked. Caldwell didn't hesitate in his response. "To each other. Every pyramid is a node, and together they form a planetary network." He leaned closer to the display. The Sentinels didn't just build walls, they built a field, an energetic cage. They hijacked the Earth's magnetic field and turned the planet itself into part of the lock. That was when Wu called. His voice was stripped of calm. "The storm's accelerating, faster than anything we modeled. We're watching a massive coronal mass ejection spin up right now, and it's rotating toward Earth." "How long?" Caldwell asked. "Best case, a week. Worst case, 48 hours. Wu didn't pause, though. "Ethan, this is catastrophic. Even without your buried problem, a hit like this wipes us out technologically. Power grid's gone, satellites dead. Anything with a circuit is ash." He then swallowed audibly. "And if your pyramid network relies on electromagnetic processes, this kind of pulse could tear it apart. Your containment system might fail at the exact moment the entity gets flooded with energy." Well, everything snapped into place. The thing had arrived on a solar fire. It had been starved ever since, kept weak, held down by the Sentinels' machines. Another storm wouldn't just break the locks, it would feed it. That was why the warning screamed from the stone, why they'd carved them deep and desperate. When the sky falls, the prison breaks. Caldwell went back down one last time. Dusk bled across the desert as he unlocked the chamber. The air inside shimmered with heat. Radiation levels had tripled since his last descent, skirting the edge of what the human body could take. The Black Pyramids no longer whispered with light. They burned, a steady crimson glow that carved hard shadows into the walls. The harm hit him immediately, deep, invasive, vibrating through bone and organ. Well, he sat down and forced his breathing steady. Let go. The vision didn't ease in this time, it crushed him. He now saw the entity as it truly was. Not a shape, not a creature, but a distributed intelligence threaded through the planet itself. a vast subterranean web stretching through crust and mantle, feeding on geothermal heat, growing millimeter by millimeter over 40,000 years. It never slept, no, it had just waited, aware the entire time, patient, testing the limits of its cage, learning the rhythms of the rocks, counting cycles of the sun. It remembered the storm that brought it here, and it knew another was coming. The vision showed him the failure, electromagnetic chaos ripping across the planet, the pyramid stuttering, then going dark, the entity surging upward, drinking in the energy storm like oxygen, not out of hatred, not even intent, mere hunger. It would spread the way fire spreads, matter into energy, energy into more of itself, faster, bigger, exponential. No scream, no judgment, just consumption, until there was nothing left to burn. Oh, the Sentinels had known, and that was the worst part. They'd seen the end coming and still chosen sacrifice over survival. Not to save themselves, their world was already collapsing, but to buy time for whoever came next. For us. 40,000 years of borrowed safety, 40,000 years to crawl out of the mud, build cities, crack atoms, and maybe, just maybe, learn enough to finish the job they couldn't. But humanity forgot. We filed the warnings under myth, turned stone screams into tourist attractions. The vision gave him one last truth before it let go. The thing beneath the world was stirring, not thrashing, not panicking, just gathering itself, feeling the solar system building overhead, drawing strength, coiling for a single decisive shove against the locks that had held it down since before history. It would be days at most, and then it would be free. And when it was, humanity would be done. Caldwell came back to himself hard, eyes snapping open, body sprawled on the chamber floor, his muscles screaming, his skull ringing like it had been struck with a hammer. The air felt thicker now and hotter, and the hum was no longer a background vibration. It was a roar, deep and physical, shaking his bones entirely. He dragged himself upright and staggered for the passage, desperate for distance, for air, for anything that wasn't those pyramids and the knowledge they'd forced into his head. Layla was waiting topside. "Dr. Caldwell, we have a problem. The ministry is shutting down. A full evacuation now." "On whose authority?" She shook her head then. "They didn't say. Orders came from very high up. Security forces are already en route. We have until morning." Caldwell looked back toward the pyramid then, its bulk cutting a black shape against the stars. Someone didn't want them digging anymore. Someone with the reach to erase permits and deploy muscle overnight. And they'd waited until the worst possible moment. He spent the night packing, not his gear, but rather the truth. Every photo, every scan, every translation copied, duplicated, encrypted. Drives hidden in boots, in bags, false compartments. If the site was being silenced, the knowledge would not be. They rolled out at dawn. Part 5. From the back window of the truck, Caldwell watched the pyramid shrink into the desert haze and felt something like grief. Not for the dig, but for what he knew was now inevitable. 36 hours later, the sky broke. Caldwell was now back in Oxford, locked in his office, his eyes glued to live feeds and incoming reports as the solar storm slammed into Earth. At first, it looked survivable. Auroras spilled across the sky as far south as the Mediterranean. Power grids groaned but held. Satellites hiccuped, corrected, and stayed online. For most of the world, it was just another headline, a beautiful, unsettling light show. At the pyramid sites, it was hell. Reports flooded in. Giza was glowing, actual visible light pouring off the stone, bright enough to wash Cairo in red. In Bosnia, sound rolled out of the ground, low and massive, shattering windows and rattling bones miles away. At Göbekli Tepe, the stones burned to the touch, and in Antarctica, Bergstrom's final message came through in fragments. "Something is rising beneath the ice. Seismographs are going crazy. Oh, it's huge. Oh, we're evacuating the station. And then the tremors spread. Not earthquakes, no, something else. Coordinated and simultaneous. Pulses radiating outward from every marked site on the planet, all following the same impossible rhythm, as if the Earth itself was answering the storm. Caldwell logged everything, timestamps, intensities, locations, the slow, undeniable end of plausible deniability. By the third day, the locks began to fail. Layla called him from Egypt, her voice shaking. The artifacts, the ones from the chamber, they moved them to a secure facility in Cairo. They're coming apart. The radiation's off the charts. The pieces are dissolving into light. What do we do? Get away, Caldwell said. As far as you can. The same messages followed from other sites. The Black Pyramids, the Sentinels, the locks, the last gift of a dead civilization, all were breaking down. They'd held for 40 millennia, but they were not going to hold any more. The network was coming apart node by node, collapsing under pressure it had never been meant to survive. The Sentinels had built it to endure ice ages, earthquakes, extinction events, everything except this, except a storm like this. Rue's face filled Caldwell's screen, hollow-eyed and unshaven, fear leaking through his professionalism. Ethan, we're seeing something we've never seen before. A signal. It's coming from multiple points around the planet, synchronized down to the microsecond. It's not electromagnetic. It's not sound. It doesn't fit any category we have. We don't even have the right instruments for it, but we know it's real, and it's getting stronger. Caldwell responded. That's it. That's the thing itself. A beat of silence, and then Wu asked the question neither of them wanted answered. If it reaches the surface, what happens? Caldwell thought of his vision, of matter unspooling into energy, of hunger without emotion or intent. Let's just say nothing good, he responded. But it didn't reach the surface, not this time. Just as the seals were stretched to their limits, just as one more surge would have torn them open, the storm began to die. Solar activity dropped. The electromagnetic chaos that had been feeding the entity and scrambling its cage at the same time started to fade. At the pyramid sites, the violence settled into a tense equilibrium. Still active, still dangerous, but stable. The seals held, barely. The prison hadn't snapped, but it had been bent, warped and forced outward, tested right up to failure. Whatever was buried beneath the world was still trapped, but it now knew exactly how close it had come. This wasn't a victory. It was a stay of execution. Caldwell sat alone in his Oxford office as dawn crept in, light cutting through stacks of data, images, and translations. He hadn't slept in days. He knew humanity had walked to the cliff edge and staggered back only because the storm had lost strength at precisely the right moment. Next time, chance would not save them. So, my dear friends, does that count as a happy ending? Does that count as a happy ending? I think it does. Oh, we're still here, in the story. Going on, who knows what's coming next? Solar flares, anything, things buried underneath the Earth for thousands of years. Who knows? Anyway, too much to think about for a Friday evening. Spring has finally sprung here. We've had a beautiful few days of sun and warmth. I actually got to go out in just a t-shirt over the last couple of days. It's been a while. I'm sure the cold weather will come again, because it just will, but we always have this nice spell at the end of February, and it really is lovely, so I've been making the most of that. But still found time to do some recording as well. So, here we go. Anyway, that is enough for this evening. Back again very soon. Something at the weekend, something for the weekend. Not sure what yet, but I will be back probably on Sunday night with something else. So, thank you for joining me once again, and any of your thoughts, feelings about that story, feel free to share them in the comment section, and as always, I will do my best to join in the conversation. Till the next time, my dear friends, just remember, it is only a story, and you sleep well, okay? Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like throwing me $1 or two. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.